Today, I'm with Jackson Hills. Now, Jackson has 15 years professional experience in a range of roles in sports management, community engagement, and more recently in government and public administration, including executive roles in the AFL, tennis, Australia, Sports Australia, and more recently the Queensland Parliament and Gold Coast City Council. Now, Jackson has worked on major events and facilities management, including the AFL fixtures and roles with the Australian Open and the Summer of Tennis events around the country. He's led successful advocacy work for major events procurement and facilities developments across tennis and football in Tasmania, New South Wales, and now Queensland, including work with local, state and federal governments securing funding for new events, new facilities and major redevelopments, leveraging tourism, economic and social development as drivers. Now, Jackson supports a number of charities and community organisations as director, company secretary and volunteer, including the Trish Multiple Sclerosis Research Foundation, the Salvation Army and Tasmanian Football Council and Set Free Care. He is an MBA from the Southern Cross University and recently completed a graduate certificate in politics and policy at Deakin University. Now, I'm really excited to speak to Jackson today. How are you going, Jackson?
Terrific, David. Thanks for the bio, the long form. That was really nice to hear. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. And I've really been looking forward to having a natter with you for some time, Jackson. So it's great to finally nail you down and looking forward to this.
Likewise, mate. I've seen a few of your shows and it's a terrific idea and looking forward to the chat today.
Yeah, cool. Well, we'll jump straight into it then. So what does well-being mean to you?
Yeah, look, I thought about this overnight and I think for me to make it really simple, it's mental and physical health. For me in the last 2 years, I've really had a rebalance of how I go about my work and personal life. And for me, that balance is critical. I guess, I wake up in the morning and if I feel refreshed and ready to get stuck into the day, and if I go to sleep that way too, I feel like I've got my well-being in a sort of balanced way. So that's what it means to me.
Yeah, cool. And has it always been like that, or it took you a while to get to that equilibrium as you talk about?
Absolutely. I mean, you and I have chatted about this before, David. I think, in those early days, a lot of us go really hard, especially at our careers. We want everything right away. I think that's a young person's sort of ambition. And I got sort of burnt out in my 20s. I went really hard after my career. And then I just started to learn, through a process that, work isn't everything. And, to have a fulfilling life, it's about, being connected to family and friends and the community. You mentioned some of those other extracurricular things that I'm involved with. That stuff for me is just as important as the career and things these days. Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. And tell us a little bit about your story, Jackson.
Yeah, well, I guess it sort of goes back to, how far do you want me to go back, mate? Do you at the school days or?
As far as you want to go. Shoot.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I guess from an educational point of view, I wouldn't say I was an A-grade student, that's for sure. I was a sporty kid. I grew up in the football, tennis sort of scene, but I played a lot of sports, basketball, cricket, all that sort of stuff. And so I'm a massive advocate for sport and physical activity, which I'm sure we'll talk about today.
Yeah.
So I thought that, by age 17, 18, I was going to go pursue a professional tennis career. It sounded great, earn millions of dollars, all that sort of stuff. And that was going to come to me on a silver platter. But I soon realised that that wasn't going to be my journey. And I started to get into sports coaching. So I got my coaching ticket at age sort of 18 and started to coach while I was still playing a little bit, sort of, I guess you'd call it semi-professionally. And then I was fortunate enough to jag a traineeship through the AFL Sports Ready program, which is a terrific program that operates now right around the country. And I was sort of one of the first people through that program, I think in 2004. And we sort of coupled that into an administrative and coaching role with Tennis Tasmania. And that's what sort of got me into sports administration. I guess from there, I stayed in Tassie for a while, but I was pretty keen to get out of the Apple Isle and up onto the mainland, as Tasmanians call it. And I found some opportunities with Tennis New South Wales and ended up staying there, as you know, for about 12 and a half years in Sydney, working all around New South Wales, right across the business, which was a real blessing for me. I kind of cut my teeth there as far as, management goes, and working with staff and working with the community and working with government. And so that was a real learning curve for me, and some great opportunities afforded to me there. That's where I did my MBA, which you mentioned in the bio. So for me, that was just a real great experience in Sydney. So I moved to Sydney from Tassie into the big smoke, and loved my time there. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, please.
So I guess just from a personal point of view, I met a lovely lady in Sydney, and we actually got married there. So lived together for some time. Fortunately, that didn't pan out to be a long-term pursuit, and we parted ways. And from there, I actually decided to go back to Tassie. Opportunity came up with the Australian Football League, actually, to go back and work at a community level, which I love, as you know, and moved back there for 2.5 years and worked right around the state with all the football leagues and the AFL down there. And a big focus on getting our facilities, fit for purpose. The female side of football was coming into play, a lot more women's participation. So we had to convert a lot of our facilities, which had traditionally been built for the blokes. So that was really exciting for me to get the money into the system to do that, partnered with all 3 levels of government. And then from there, I pivoted again and thought, well, I've worked in sport for a long time. What about actually trying to work directly with the government? So I looked for a range of opportunities, but I thought, look, I'm a political tragic. I've got to get to Canberra. Got to get to Canberra. That's the heartbeat of it all. And I took a little project-based opportunity with the Australian Sports Commission, which is also called Sport Australia, as some of your listeners will know. And I was able to work on a big project, a workforce development planning project for the whole sector, which really opened my eyes, mate, to this whole thing of systems thinking and thinking more about the industry as opposed to not just participants and coaches, but every facet of the system. And one of the things I liked about working there was that Sport Australia started to refer to it as the sport and physical activity sector. Professional sport and professional coaching and those sort of things, but community, health, education, and a whole range of other sort of parts of the social system were starting to be included in that direction. And that was quite exciting. So I spent 7 months there on that project, and it was getting a bit cold in Canberra around winter time.
Well, it sounds like you just about get comfortable in a role, and then you get itchy feet, and it's like, I'm going to try something else. So
you nailed it. Except the only time that isn't the case was working with tennis for a very long time. But I was fortunate to move into a few different roles there, which it's a good point you make. I'm always chasing that sort of next thing. But yeah, look, there's so many things that I'm just really proud of in each of those roles, and kind of feel like I'd been able to make an impact. And that for me is the time to move on, when you feel like you've made an impact and you can then move on and take those learnings into something else. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm up in Queensland on the Gold Coast. Not too much of a tough life living here near the beach, which really helps with that balance thing that I was talking about earlier. So fantastic lifestyle. I've met a new girl up here, Shannon, and we're now engaged. And starting a life up here in Queensland, mate. Working now with Gold Coast City Council.
Yeah, wow. And I think it's terrific how you've brought a whole person into the conversation there, Jackson, because you've talked a bit about your personal life and and how that's integrated with your work. And you talk about purpose and growth, which is obviously important for you in terms of the roles that you've had, and then you've moved on. And people say that's a big part of well-being, in terms of how you feel. But in relation to all the jobs that you've had, wow, I mean, you have worked right across the ecosystem, really, and all that experience and knowledge that you've had across the different sports and different areas and cultures, I suppose, because Tassie's probably a little bit different to Sydney, and Sydney's a little bit different to up in the Gold Coast. So I think, in terms of that systems thinking and application of it, it sounds like you got some great experience to to leverage now in your role up in Queensland. So tell us a little bit about the work that you did at Queensland Parliament, and I know that you've just said you've moved into the city of Gold Coast now that you're in public administration.
Yeah, sure. Look, I guess the role, I was with Queensland Parliamentary Service for about a year and a half. So I worked with a couple of different MPs, a young fella up here called Sam O'Connor, who's one of the young up-and-coming MPs up here in Queensland. So that was really exciting. He's really engaging, got a lot of energy out in the community. And then I worked with, on the other side of that, someone who's been a career politician. It's probably in their last or second last term of government. Public service, Rob Mulhook. So that sort of got two different ends of the spectrum. Huge amount of experience I picked up there in a short space of time. And it's not until you work with these people you realise just what their lifestyle's like. Like it's a 7 day a week, 24/7 sort of enterprise. So for me, I can kind of just come in and out of that as I need to achieve my balance. But for those guys, I think the expectation is just getting higher and higher for public office holders in this country in their activities locally. So I worked in their electorate offices here on the Gold Coast, responding to a lot of constituent inquiries. It could be about healthcare, it could be about education, a lack of policing or those sorts of issues, and we would refer them on to various agencies and get some action where we could. We'd also develop policy in the areas that we were passionate about, and I was able to work on a few areas that I'm really passionate about in that social development space, in particular around homelessness and housing affordability, which is a real issue up here on the Gold Coast, which we'll probably touch on a bit later. But also around some areas of drug and alcohol treatment, which is another challenge up here, and also domestic and family violence. So for me, they're really hot button issues, and it was great to be able to get involved in that, meet some awesome people that are involved in delivering services in that space, but also look at what we could do to develop policy to get more investment into those areas too. The other parts of the role is supporting those MPs when they're in Brisbane. So they're obviously in Parliament, representing their community probably 30 weeks of the year. So we would staff them up there, help them write some speeches, meet with stakeholders, that sort of stuff. So really sort of broad-ranging role, mate. I loved it, absolutely loved it.
And why do you do what you do? So, I think you said before you're a political tragic, or I might have got that a little bit wrong, but along those lines, because you've obviously come from the sport background. So yeah give it.
Look, I'm probably as passionate equally about those things, and I've always sought to combine them, especially in the last 5 or 10 years. So when I was in sport, I was always looking at how we could work with government around mutually beneficial projects, so facilities for the community. If we get them upgraded, it's better amenity for the community, but it's also better for the sport. So, sort of attacking it that way and finding ways to achieve mutually benefit goal. Obviously, a lot of that comes down to funding. But sometimes it comes down to things like promotion, attracting events to a community, which can generate income. It might be about, some social policy areas, like using sport as a vehicle, which I know you're passionate about, to get people active, working on their mental health as well. So for me, I've just always understood the real great attributes of sport and how they help government achieve outcomes. And the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now is I just feel like I've got more to give, and one of the ways you can do that in Australia is, being part of the public office and sort of doing that on behalf of your community. And so I guess that's the role that I see I'm playing now and hopefully into the future.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is that you're coming at it from all different angles, right? So you might be connecting local residents in the community groups, or you might be bringing investment in by, events, for example, or there's a whole bunch of things there. And just picking up on what you said around one of your passions of social housing and homelessness, I know recently you were involved in the Your Sleepout. So how did that go?
Oh, it was a terrific experience. I mean, look, I was blessed to do that on the Gold Coast. I know some people who were doing it in Sydney where you are, and also down
Bit
in
of a
Tassie.
difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, look, first thing I say when I talk about this is it's nothing like it would be. I accept that. But what it does do is it gives general, people in the community a bit of an idea of what it might be like for people who have to do this every night of the year. We were set up at Robina Stadium. We slept on a piece of concrete. We took a sleeping bag. We shared some great stories, had a few laughs, but it was really a serious night because they, Vinnies, who run the CEO Sleepout St Vincent de Paul Society, they'd organised some past homelessness people who had been able to get out of that environment and back into the workforce or back into a life of purpose to come and speak to us about what they used to go through. And, it's shattering, really. You talk about people that are getting spat on in the street or woken up when they're asleep and, obviously robbed by each other for personal belongings. So it's a really tough environment. And some of these people are mothers with children, and it's just devastating. So for me, it was a real eye-opener. The positive for us is we raised some more awareness about it. We raised, I think, about $650,000 at the Gold Coast event, and that's all been just pushed straight into housing, mate. So they've recently built 8 new units at Arundel for mature age women who are homeless. So it's all about trying to create awareness and then get more investment in housing. A real simple purpose.
Yeah, awesome. So that advocacy piece, isn't it, and the awareness is what you're talking about. But there's some tangible things there with the housing that you're able to provide. So is it something that is it gonna be an annual thing for you?
Yeah, I think so. My boss, Rob, who I was working for at the time, Rob Mulhook, I think it was his 8th event. So I've done one now. So until I've done 8, I need to keep going, I think, to try and beat that record. So
Yeah.
I'll give that a crack. The other thing that it's sort of turned into for me, though, there's a bit of a push locally to get a similar model set up to Common Ground, which you may have heard of, which is in Brisbane. It's in New York and a few other places, I think, in Britain too, mate, as you might know, which is housing but in a supported living environment with a mix of people that might be homeless or just really low income earners. And so I'm looking to join the push to get that up and running on the Gold Coast. So that's sort of spiraled out of it for me. So hopefully it means that I can work in that space a little bit more frequent than just once a year.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, sounds like it's really a big passion area for you and, much needed to support the community. And in terms of all your experience, Jackson, we've talked about you've worked across the system, different sports such as tennis and AFL and Sports Australia or Sports Commission. In addition to the leadership roles, now that you've had in state government and now you're local government, 1 in 2 Australians have got a chronic condition, and health inequality is getting worse. So, if you could nudge one part of the system to improve the well-being of Australians, what could that be?
I saw that question coming up. It's so hard to pick one. But look, if I was to say the number one that I'm most passionate about and probably a little bit more well-versed in, it's around physical activity and encouraging more physical activity, especially in kids, but right across all demographics. And for me, I'm a beneficiary of that. I grew up in the sports system. I understand it's about getting outside. It's learning to play as part of a team. It's dealing with things like winning, but also dealing with things like losing. And I don't think we do that enough these days. I think we're really reticent to help people deal with loss. And I think sport's a great way of doing that. And it's a life lesson. It teaches you strategy. It's social, which is so important for mental health, as you know. It's just got great mental and physical health benefits. And I'd love to see the education system go back to that more traditional focus on physical activity in the curriculum. I know the curriculum's so crowded now, but these kids spend so much time on devices and technology, and they're going to live with that for the rest of their life. I just think we need to carve out more time for physical activity. So that's a passion of mine, mate. I'd love to see more of a focus, especially in the school system, around that. And I know that's something that you're passionate about too.
And how do you think state government could pull the lever there to improve physical activity in communities? What could it do?
Look, I think there's a whole range of things they can do, but I think they need to be really focused, because I know that curriculum space, there's a move to make it more national and to move away from state-based curriculums. So, for me, I guess it's about having, an idea of what they'd like to achieve and then working on that with the federal government to go, how do we work back from there? So, for example, are we trying to decrease obesity? Are we trying to improve mental health? Are we trying to, create leaders in our community? Like, what are the outcomes? And let's work back from there. For me, I think the simplest thing is it just looks like more time in the curriculum allocated to sport and physical activity. That would be a good place to start. And I'd love to see the states pushing up to the federal government to make sure that's part of this national curriculum conversation. I just know, working with 8 states and territories, and we see it right now with COVID, that's not easy because you do have 8 different views, probably more than 8 views on how to do this stuff. So I don't think you want to be too rigid with how it should look. So that's why I think they should focus on what outcomes do we want first, and then leave it up to the states to have a little bit of co-design opportunity in their state or territory on what that looks like. But for me, it's about carving out more time for physical activity when kids are at school.
And I don't know the answer to this. Is there a mandatory figure on how much physical activity there should be in schools at the moment?
I think, look, I'm a little naive there too, to be perfectly honest, but I do know that it's different in each state and territory. So that would be a good place to start, is like, what's our minimum? There's a minimum I know from Sport Australia's point of view, there's a preference on how much kids at certain age groups should be doing as part of their development. So that would be a good place to start. But again, that's only looking at that from a sport development point of view. I think we need to be thinking about some of the social outcomes we're looking for, community leadership, all those other skills that come with sport development as well.
Yeah, and it's, I suppose, linking into those physical activity guidelines from, like you said, Sports Australia and the WHO as a benchmark, really. Interesting. So really like that answer. I think it can be a golden thread in terms of trying to tackle that's physical activity and tackling some of those other conditions like obesity and mental health we talk about. And just going back to your story, which I love, because it's, you started at AFL Job Ready as the traineeship, and you've kind of, you bounced around the sport and sports system, and it's not linear. You've gone here, there, and everywhere, and you've obviously ended up in public kind of administration now. But where do you see yourself personally in that system, and how do you contribute and influence it?
Yeah, I think you summarised my sort of career really well there in a sentence, mate. I might need to get that from you later so I could use it. But I started off in a traineeship, which is a great entree into the workforce. I actually did something with AFL Sports Ready recently, sort of, what is it now, 15 years on. We actually reflected back on starting on that traineeship, which was a lot of fun. But to answer your question, I think because I've had the pleasure of working in both those streams, so sport and physical activity, and then also now in government, I kind of feel that I'm a bit of a connector there. But I do definitely see it as a system, like the way you explained it, and we talked about it earlier. So the community organisations in the sports space, they need funding, they need facilities to operate and deliver their outcomes. Governments can't do it themselves. Governments can't run the sport and physical activity space. It'd take too many staff. It'd take their focus away from other services. So they need NGOs and community organisations to deliver. So they're actually relying on each other. It's about working more cohesively together to get better outcomes. And as you and I have talked about before, it can be a cluttered marketplace sometimes, and often we're tripping over each other to do the same thing. So I think the more that we can sort of co-design, to use a word that's often overused these days, but the more we can collaborate and actually work on delivering outcomes in this area and merging community and government sort of strategy together, the better. So whenever I talk to sport, I always ask them, even if it's a local club, have you met with the mayor? Have you met with your councillor? Are you talking to the council? Are you getting them down to your events? What's your relationship like? And then vice versa. Working with Brooke now, I'm like, okay, so who are our community organisations? Have we been down to see them? What can we learn? And I think it's about working closer together in those spaces to deliver a better outcome. So for me, I think I experience on both sides. I've got the learnings about, where all the rabbit holes are and where we don't need to go and where we need to focus. And I think I can add value to both of those streams to deliver better outcomes. So that's kind of where I see myself sitting, sort of right in the centre of it and working kind of on both sides.
Yeah, and What I'm listening and what's coming up is relationships, building rapport, understanding, collaboration, and it's about a win-win for everybody who's you're kind of working with. Have you got any examples of where you've done that really well?
Yeah, I think the one example that comes straight to mind, I touched on that female-friendly facility sort of project in Tassie a little while ago. What a different approach to how they would have historically done it. In the past, AFL would have gone and done their own thing, cricket would have gone and done their own thing, soccer would have gone and done, or footy would have done their own thing, and then the government would have tried to do it themselves, right? So there's 4 different projects trying to deliver the same outcome.
Mm.
What we did in Tassie was we all did a collective audit of all the facilities that we all use. The government own them, the sports hire them. We all got together and we audited those facilities together. We found out the condition of them together. We found out what the state of repair was and what the investment was required in future to get them up to scratch to actually achieve the same outcome for the 3 sporting codes. And then we took that as a package to the state government leading up to the election to kind of go, here's a problem. Here's the piece of work we've done and the data that we've got. These are the outcomes we think we can achieve if we get these facilities up to scratch, particularly around female participation, but a whole range of other things. And the sports are actually working together and they're bringing a case to government together. And I think we generated a lot of interest. We actually secured $10 million, which is quite large for Tassie, to go into female-friendly facilities off the back of that for a 3-year program. So they're sort of in the 3rd year of that now down there. But that's just one example of how you can kind of bring that whole system together.
And it's when you remove the egos of the different sports and they're having their own agendas, and it's a common purpose, isn't it? And I think that to cultivate that takes a bit of time. Sometimes you need to have a bit of a rumble with some difficult conversations. But congratulations on that. That's fantastic. And is there a case study on that?
Yeah, there is. Look, I can actually send you through some info, and if you want to share it as part of this podcast, you're welcome to as well, mate. Just on your point though, the relationship stuff didn't happen overnight though, and in fact, the footy and cricket relationship hadn't been great for a long time. So that's where we focused first, and then by working closer together and getting some shared sort of skin in the game, we were able to actually take something to government, and then government recognised that too, because they're like, well, geez, these sports don't normally work together. We probably need to get on board with this. It might be once in a million. So, but it does work as a good case study for future investment opportunities, I think. Look, I'll send something through after this call, mate.
Yeah, fantastic. And I suppose that brings us to the end of the questions, really. Given that you're a tennis player, though, and it's Wimbledon at the moment, who do you fancy?
Oh, I don't want to get myself in trouble here because I actually haven't checked the overnight results. So if I pick a favourite and they've gone out last night, I feel really embarrassed. But let me put it this way: I would love to see Ash Barty, do some great things on the grass. I was really pleased to see some of the Aussie results. I know most of them have lost now in the boys, but some great promising young kids, one of the old kids now coming through from New South Wales, where I used to work. Jordan Thompson is one of those. So great to see those guys doing well. I must be honest, though, I'd love to see Roger Federer get close, getting back to that same level of number of Grand Slams with Nadal and keep pushing that little competitive system, make it harder for Novak to surpass them. So it's going to be an interesting conclusion to the event, mate. Very exciting.
Yeah, it's always exciting, isn't it, when Wimbledon's on or any of the Grand Slams? So fantastic. Well, I think that brings us to the end, Jackson. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
Nothing. I guess since you and I have started connecting, mate, it's really got me curious about this systems thinking stuff, and it's something that I take into my everyday now a little bit and sort of go, are we looking at this from a whole system point of view? So that's been the learning from the few conversations you and I have had about it. I've gone and done a little bit more research on it myself. I kind of found myself working that way. It wasn't by design, so I am keen to learn a lot more about it. So thanks for having me on the program to talk about how that looks for me. Appreciate it.
No problem. And yeah, thanks for giving me your time today, and keep doing what you're doing up there in sunny Gold Coast. And yeah, I hope to catch up with you in person soon.
Excellent, mate. Let's get you up here for the marathon next year.
Yeah, that'd be good. All right, Jackson. Catch you soon.
Thanks, mate.